Well, welcome everybody. I'm Cary Griffin, the CEO of Griffin Hammis Associates, located in Florence, Montana, and with offices around the country. Today I am working with our friends and colleagues at VCU at the Research and Training Center. And we're going to be doing a short session today on how it is that you connect discovery and job development. And so obviously the title of this presentation is The Pathway from Discovery to Job Development, Essential Steps for Customized Employment Success. Typically, when we teach discovery, it's bundled in a larger format of training, generally at least 40 hours of classroom time, and then it's typically tied with on-site technical assistance to help implement. But one of the key issues that comes up is how do we take the assessment information or the profile information that we've gathered on somebody and then have us lead us into job development and guide those steps. So that's what I'm hoping to talk about today in the next hour. So again, the idea is how do we take this information and then link it directly to job development and employment development in general, because sometimes we end up with self-employment outcomes. So discovery begins with the premise that everybody can work. That there is no such thing as not having successful discovery. Discovery is perhaps done incorrectly, but the person wouldn't be at fault at that point. We have to have that assumption that everyone can work, even though some of us, me in particular, not always smart enough to figure that out. But I think you'll see, and as you study discovery more and as you implement it more, you'll start to understand the clues that are revealed that really do make us think differently about the employment equation. So discovery is the basis of employment planning. It's subbed in a lot of times for the traditional assessments, be they paper or pencil or some other kind of norm-referenced or comparative approach. And of course, customized employment moves away from the idea of comparing people to other people. It goes so far as to say even traditional job descriptions do not typically fit in this situation. We a lot of times have to create something new that enables a person to go to work. So the customized employment, again, is a non-comparative, non-competitive approach. And as we all know, in the law that governs us, sort of the supported employment rules that have been around since about 1986, it's still called competitive supported employment. So customized employment is kind of an offshoot of that says a lot of times people get in trouble in the employment, in getting a job because they can't compete in traditional ways. And we really do have to sort of hyper-individualize the process for people to become successful. We use discovery and a customized approach with all kinds of folks. It is a universal strategy in many ways. And so the information that I'm going to give you today comes from working with folks who primarily have maybe never had a job, but they might be an Iraq or Afghanistan veteran with a service-related disability coming back, having started a career perhaps or learned something in the military, but because of their disability or their new situation, they cannot compete in traditional ways, or they can't do the work in a traditional sense. And so we'd use a customized approach to restructure employment and also gather information about that person that is different than what we would get in traditional vocational evaluation and testing. So discovery and your employment plan, or if you want to call it a job development plan, are driven by the applicant's strengths, their skills, the tasks that they do and that they enjoy, or tasks that they're learning, or skills that are emerging, and then interests and conditions of employment. One of the things that we hope to rectify with a customized approach is that for many years we've focused on people's interests, but interests aren't enough in work. Certainly they aid learning and they give us direction. But you know, a lot of us have interests that, you know, we don't have the wherewithal. We don't have the skills, or it would take us so long to get the skills that we would never get a job, perhaps. You know, I have an interest in being a rich Hollywood movie star, but, you know, it's probably not going to happen for me. I don't have those attributes. I don't have those skills. And so we think differently about this. You know, we really do focus in on what can the person do, and through the use of good systematic instruction, how do we teach somebody something that they want to learn? So that we'll come back to, because that really changes the way that we approach employment, the way that we engage employers, and the way that we think about work. We also want to think about the conditions of employment, or what we might call ecological fit. Where does the person fit best? Okay, what environments are they going to do best in? And one of the things that I think we all know deep inside is that as employers, we tend to hire people who are like us, and not just in a demographic sense, but we hire people who like what we like, who want to learn the skills that maybe a master craftsman knows. We surround ourselves a lot of times with people who we share opinions with, and that we share hobbies with, or that we share our vocation with. So, you know, musicians, a guitar player tends to hang out with other guitar players. It's not only because they kind of speak the same language, but it's because you mentor one another. And part of the way that we have approached discovery and customized employment is really trying to leverage that natural mentorship that human beings seem to have. But again, one of the things that gets in our way is that we have a real lack of intimacy with the community and with employers. We don't spend enough time with them. Discovery allows us to sort of explore and leverage, again, the willingness of a community and of employers to help one another. And so it is a little bit of a different approach. It is a nuanced approach, I will admit, and it's not something that comes really naturally. Okay, and as I said, individualization is required. Now, some people on the federal level suggest that, well, maybe, and the state level, maybe this isn't quite as scalable as other approaches. You know, I don't know another way to get somebody a job other than to individualize it. That's what all our federal legislation says. The Voc Rehab Act in particular really emphasizes individualization, and it's the predominant model that we want to follow. We can try to scale things and try to get 10,000 people out of jobs at a time. I've never seen that be terribly successful nor fulfilling for the individual who wants a job. I'm an individual. My job is sculpted to my needs in many ways, and as an employer, I want to individualize my jobs. I don't want people to just feel like a cog in a machine. And I think that because of the multiple and complex barriers of those that we serve, we need to individualize to be successful. Right now, the employment rate for people with intellectual disabilities in this country is about 15%. Depending on whose data you use. You know, we've tried scalability. It doesn't work very well. We need to go back to individualization. So part of the process requires negotiation of job duties and or of employer and coworker expectations. It's not a downward trend. It's actually emphasizing what people are good at. And again, having robust job coaching, heavy on systematic instruction, heavy on engaging the natural support in a workplace. So, and employment development is really determined by the individuals. It's not determined by who's hiring or market demand or growth jobs or labor market studies or those kinds of things. We're still very heavily invested in that in the rehabilitation and the community rehab system. You know, I've never gotten a job for somebody because, oh, the computer industry is hiring. It's always been around the individual and where the individual is going to fit best and the skills and the tasks that they can take to that employer or they can learn on the job the way the rest of us did. I think for folks who are in transition programs, transition from school to work, I think this is really, really important that you not be focused on the market or on growth industries in your community. And I know schools get a lot of that kind of information. It really is about figuring out who that kid is and where they're going to fit. And getting them some experience, you know, during the school year and their career career, so that, you know, they've got a good sense of what happens after graduation, that they've got an array of possibilities, and that, you know, we're starting to demystify what it is to have work. You know, in the old days, well, I guess today too, we still have school districts that may have, you know, 5 or 6 work sites out in the community, and they rotate the kids through. That does a couple things. A lot of that's unpaid work. So it teaches kids that work is punishment. You know, personally, I've never had an unpaid work experience in my life. When I started milking cows on the farm, for instance, they paid me minimum wage, and even though I didn't know anything about milking cows, they taught me and they paid me at the same time. Most of my jobs have been like that. You know, I think we're also, by doing, you know, very short cycles, like 1 or 2 hours a week of work, that we've taught a generation that work is only a few hours a week. And so I think we need to, you know, through the school years, I think we need to sort of be building up that propensity for work and through experience. So customized employment, again, means individualizing the employment relationship between employees and employers in ways that meet the needs of both. So I need a job, you need somebody to do these tasks, let's see if there's a match here. And I wouldn't just be going out and engaging employers by saying, oh, I've got, you know, a classroom here, or I've got a day program here, and I'm serving 30 people here, and I need some jobs for 4 people or even 1 person. I'm not going out randomly getting to know what employers do. I'm actually getting to know through discovery who that person is, and then using that person to target places where I think they may fit in the community. So the bottom line for customized employment is that we're looking to work with the employer to satisfy the unmet needs that are recognized or sometimes not recognized in their companies. Now, that could be internal needs, that staff needs some help. You know, if you're a line mechanic and you're constantly having to run back and forth to get parts from the parts room, wouldn't it be great to have a parts runner maybe? That would save time and that would save money. You know, it also may be that customers are waiting in lines for too long. Is there something that we could do? Is there a position that we could create or modify that would you know, remedy that situation? So the satisfying the unmet needs comes from a lot of different directions within a business. So that process requires sort of a deconstructing of job descriptions and then reconstructing them through what we would call an interest-based negotiation. That is, here's what's going to be good for your potential worker, your new employee, and here's how it's going to benefit your company. Now, a lot of companies, of course, don't have job descriptions, especially if you're working with small business, and that's sort of where we advocate, and I'll talk about that more. But even if you don't have a written job description, the boss always has a job description in his head or her head about the way that job ought to get done. Or you'll find that coworkers or the manager or whoever that you're running into, they have some opinions and some ideas about the way a job ought to be done. And so the negotiation process can be quite broad in working with a number of different folks about rethinking, not overwhelming people, but rethinking in a constructive negotiation process, you know, how is it that we would restructure this work? So Often DPG, which is Discovering Personal Genius, which is kind of our brand of discovery, it may not lead to a customized job. In fact, I would say probably at least 50%, and maybe higher than that, 50% of the time it doesn't lead to a customized job where we've totally restructured a job or created something new. Instead, what we've found is that we find a good job match because, again, starting with the individual and having really good information about who that person is, where they're going to fit, the kind of skills and tasks that they can do for that employer, and the things that, in observing the workplace that we can figure out. I can figure out how to teach that to that person, or I can support that person's supervisor in teaching them that task. Or maybe there's some technology that we could bring to bear in that, whether it's an app or, some kind of robotics or some simple template or fixture that we could build. It doesn't always lead to a customized job, just a really good job match, a better job match than if you're just eyeballing it, doing some, 20-hour or 10-hour or 5-hour observation or a test. Really doesn't give you the kind of information that Discovery is going to give you to perform that job match. Discovery doesn't ask what type of job is best for this person, but it rather seeks to answer that question, who is this person? And Michael Callahan at Mark Gold Associates really, brilliant on this, and as the architect of Discovery, really sort of bit through the fog and really helped clarify a lot of the stuff that we were doing from the mid-90s. In the mid-90s, 1996, I think, we published a manual called Person-Centered Career Planning that had a lot of our basis for Discovery and some of the directions that we've gone with that. But we have to give credit to Mike Callahan for really clarifying where we were going and using very eloquent language in the process that we adopted, so that we weren't running it at opposite ends of the sort of the same process. We don't seek out dream jobs. Dream jobs are things that maybe come once in a lifetime, or they come at the end of your career, actually, rather than the beginning. What we try to do is engage people as soon as possible in the world of work. And sometimes those jobs turn out they don't fit very well. But this is how we learn. All of us have probably had a job or two that didn't really fit us very well, but we needed the money. Again, those of you working in the transition world, remember back to when you got your first job and how much earning that money meant to you. So, again, when you take money out of the equation, it really changes the reason why you go to work. It's more coercive than anything else, I think, sometimes. I know that's not always possible for schools, but we do want to aim in that direction. We do want to get as close to reality as we can. We use Discovering Personal Genius information to find the best fit, right, in a setting that matches those conditions of employment that I talked about, the vocational themes that I'm going to talk about, and that promises a career or skill growth. That is, that jobs, as they evolve, you start to see this, this pathway for a person. And it may have multiple branches, obviously. Most of us are pretty complex, as human beings. We don't have just one like or dislike. We have a lot of different sort of vocational pulls or directions that we could go, and all of us sort of know that in our career. But what we want is, we don't want to just go out and get somebody let's say a grocery bagging job, right? That's a big job for folks with intellectual disabilities. It's hard to walk into a grocery store and not see somebody bagging groceries. And there are people who just really dig that whole customer service thing, that whatever it is that brought them there, they found that match, and that's great for them. But we know that that's fewer than 1 or 2% of people who really like and want to stay at that job. And so in customized and in Discovery, what we're looking for are, where's the career or the skill path for that? Is there something, first of all, did we just go to the grocery store because they had a help wanted sign out? Well, that right there, that may be a great first job for somebody, but I would say that there are a lot of great first jobs for people. There are millions and millions of businesses in the United States. Why do we always go there? Why do we always go to the box store? Why do we always go to the grocery store or fast food? We don't need to go there, and I hope to make a case for that today. But if we were going there, we would go there because the person had a customer service theme, or they had an agricultural theme, or a culinary theme, something like that that kind of makes sense for why you would start in an entry-level job at that particular place of business. With that, during that negotiation, right, we would say, this is a great job. We know from industry data that your average grocery bagger is only going to last about 8 weeks, and then they're moving on to another job, or they're going to college, or they're going to vo-tech school, or whatever. I would expect the same option for the folks that we're supporting. And that negotiation might be, gee, it's great, and what we'd like to see is after 8 or 10 or 12 weeks, something reasonable. What we'd like to see is some exploration of a new job, of new tasks being added over in produce, or maybe becoming, a meat cutter with a union job, or going to work in the bakery. Again, we would assume that we're in the grocery store for a reason, and that comes back to the vocational theme. And a vocational theme is a broad category that holds hundreds of thousands of job descriptions in a specific area. If you looked at an agricultural theme, you would not only find grocery stores, but you could find farm-to-table restaurants, and you could find all the different kinds of crops that are grown, and that would, and then there's, the fertilizer industry, and that would lead you to chemistry. It just goes on and on and on from going to veterinary medicine, to botany, to to tractor repair. That theme could take you in a lot of different places, and so you're almost overwhelmed by the opportunity that you can create using this idea. You're no longer scratching your head wondering what to do. All you have to do is follow the theme and find people in your community who also share a similar theme, and then you refine over time. And so early career, early jobs, summer jobs, after-school jobs, work experiences, both paid and unpaid as an adult, and again, keeping the unpaid stuff to as minimal as you could keep it. But all of this can happen through discovery or through job development, using a customized approach. So discovery is very nuanced. And it's a skilled practice, which means it takes time. You don't go to, even a 3-day training in discovery and know how to do discovery. All you've got is the information about discovery. You actually have to go do it. You have to do that initial home visit. You have to know what it's like to ask somebody, can I have permission to look in your bedroom? Can you show us around your bedroom? Because in so many situations, that's where people keep the clues to their life. They keep their collections. They keep the books that they like to read. They keep the movie CDs that they like to watch. All of that stuff is contained in the bedroom or out in the garage. But as a matter of practice, we really like to see the bedroom and the home. We like to meet with the family if the family's involved. We certainly want to see if the person lives in their own place. We certainly want to see that place. Discovery, so it's practice, and what we find is it takes about a year. It takes doing 4 or 5 discovery sessions, or generating a profile with somebody to really start to understand how discovery works and how they can be so different, one person to another. And this is one of the reasons why discovery is best done with a team. So a typical team for us would be your lead employment person, whoever that would be, typically an employment specialist who would take the person through discovery, job development, job coaching. It would also involve the person, obviously, who guides the team and who is in charge, really. They may not do all the heavy lifting, but they're certainly the center of attention in that. We love to have family involved. Sometimes we have had great, special ed teachers are so great, and we've had so many great special ed teachers involved with the team, both, current and former. That's the level of their dedication to their students. It's very telling, but they can give us insights into best ways to support a person, into how to instruct them, and how to, read the clues that they're giving off in their language or in their behavior. Right now, Discovery is taking us, the averages are always tough, but about 30 hours. Some folks, who have had a career before that we're working with now, who, have acquired a disability over time, it might take 10 hours, and we're not doing a whole discovery. I'm not going to go find, their parents unless it makes sense to do that. If I'm working with a 42-year-old carpenter who's fallen off a roof and now uses a chair, I'm not going to go interview their family unless the person says, my family is, runs a construction company, or they have real insights that you need to hear. That would be great, but we would start in a different place and probably end in a different place with that person than the typical person that we're working with who has little to no work history. So 30 hours, generally 5 or 6 weeks, is about how long it takes to develop a good profile and then start job development. So much of your job development sort of road work has been done if you're doing discovery right, that job development is actually, not terribly complex at this point. You have so many clues if you've done discovery correctly. So again, that's a random number. I mean, it's taken over a lot of different samples and in a lot of different situations in a lot of different states. We find that we have much better job match, as I was saying earlier, and what that's meant in a number of places, is a reduction in job coaching, because when you have a good job match, you don't have to constantly be augmenting, learning, and fixing and patching the placement to put the supports in place. They're already kind of there because you have a good job match. Easter Seal, Southern California, that we work with a lot, has been tracking this over the last few years of working with them, and they've been able, depending on their community and person, they've been able to drop job coaching by 20 to 40%. Well, that means great consistency for the individual, for the worker. It means great consistency for the employer and the family, and it means, great cost savings, obviously. So, and we find also that discovery means faster placement. If you can, get that sense of urgency and get it going, what happens again because of better job match, because you're really targeting very specific businesses in your community, when you've taken a lot of considerations into play here, you understand the supports the person will need, it means that folks are going to get their job faster. Kaposia, which is a wonderful organization in Minnesota, recently published some of their data on that, and I'd urge you to go to kaposia.org and to look at one of their latest newsletter. I think it may have been late 2015 or early 2016, but they have a wonderful little piece about, comparing their placement data over the years, and they're they're strictly a community employment program, so very well run and top-notch organization. So we start with discovery. We're starting with home and neighborhood visits. We're meeting with the family when the individual gives us permission to do that. We want to enlist the family at that point. And again, I'm not going into all of the nuance of that and the scripts. We're in the process right now of rewriting the job developer's handbook, and it will have a lot of that stuff in. If you just need a really good chapter on discovery, we recently rewrote our book, Making Self-Employment Work for People with Disabilities. There's a chapter on discovery in there that explains explains all of these processes. And quite frankly, if you understand how to put together a small business, it makes you a much better job developer because you start thinking a little bit more like a business owner. Also, we have, Relias classes, our on-site classes on discovery that you can take as well, and just go to our website and you can find that stuff. But there's lots of information on all of this. How do you conduct a home visit? How do you structure that? How long should it be? And then we go, we visit the neighborhood as long as it's safe and secure. And, this is another reason to go with a team of people. And again, the team's generally pretty small. Again, the lead person, the individual, maybe a family member or two, maybe a teacher, 4 or 5 people is generally what we find in a team, because then we have a lot of sets of eyes looking at the individual and their performance and the tasks that they're doing and the circumstances. And I see things differently sometimes that other people see. It's amazing, right? And so we want that diversity of thought in the process. But the neighborhood visits, I'm looking for transportation, I'm looking for employment options, I'm looking for clues that maybe somebody else in the neighborhood has the same, hobby or interest as this person, because there is a natural ally there that maybe we can enlist in the process. A lot of times I'm looking for, to be surprised. We also use this process called smooth listening in that when I'm visiting the home, I'm not going in with a checklist. In fact, I go in without anything to write on. I leave my phone in the car. I let the people talk, and I have some things that I want to get out of them, but I can steer the conversation in a respectful, non-dominating way. And again, the listener in a conversation is the one who's in charge, not the talker, right? When you quit listening to me, I'm out of a job. So we want people to tell their story, basically. We want to know about Junior growing up and how was Sally, tell us Sally's life story from your perspective. I'm going to have lots of time to work with Sally. I may not have a lot of time to work with the family, but I'm also going to try to engage them. I want to know, where do they work? Where do the siblings work? What kinds of connections do you have in the community? Could you drive your son or daughter to work? Little things like that. Are you afraid that your son or daughter is going to get injured on the job? After all, many parents kept their children alive, right, through seizures and operations, and here you come in wanting to put them in a factory or in on a farm or something that is inherently dangerous to the family, because again, it's an unknown. Are you feeling that resistance? What can you do to provide safety and security for that family member? So often I hear that folks say, oh, the parents are difficult. No, the parents are not difficult. They're protecting their son or daughter. I would much rather have that than somebody who wasn't engaged, that didn't care. So again, we learn these things, and you may do more than one home visit to get the information that you need, or just to check in, to be respectful. We interview, again, others. I interviewed a sister not too long ago up in Canada of a young man who grew up on a ranch in western Colorado. Her perspective of her brother was very different from the perspective of her parents. And so we want to get those perspectives. We want to know, what do your siblings think? And again, all this is done with permission. So, I like to, if I can, again, go back and talk to folks who have known this person and knows this person well, their friends and their family and former colleagues. We really, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not quite so interested in skills. Right? Skills are something that, very early on we adopted person-centered planning, and now, person-centered planning's come back not that it ever went away. It's a fantastic process. Discovery is based on person-centered planning. But it's come back into the light of day. Suddenly, there's a lot of renewed interest in it because the Centers for Medicaid Services have said, in the adults, the adult settings rule, that you need to be using person-centered planning. Discovery is person-centered planning, so you don't need both. You need one or the other. But the reason why we moved to discovery was that we saw right away that there were some things missing in traditional person-centered planning that didn't address employment. Things like Social Security benefits. Pretty important to know the impact of wages or earnings on Social Security. I also want to know, what do people need to live? So very early on, back in the late 80s, early 90s, we started adding a financial page to the planning documents. But probably the biggest issue for us was that it was based on, what are you interested in doing? And again, we can have all the interest in the world, but it doesn't get us a job. We have to have skills and tasks that are exploitable in the workforce or in the workplace, or you need to be able to teach those and learn those. So we really focus on tasks and skills, and Michael Callahan, again, is so clear in his writings on this topic. We kind of came at it both from a little bit different direction, but it's the same stuff, and we need to, we really need to hunker down. So if you're going to do discovery, what I would also say is that you need to learn systematic instruction. Whatever you call it in your state, precision learning, errorless learning, whatever it is, it's based on engineering principles. We tend to also only job develop up to our level of competency to teach. So this is why you don't see people with welding jobs, because there are only a few of us who know how to weld, I think, who have ever been job developers. And so we tend not to teach that. Not that you need to know how to do that, but you need to be able to break that job down and then engage the person who would typically train somebody who was going to do some welding tasks on a job. Who are they? Where's that coworker or that manager who's going to teach that person typically? Can I give them some insights into how I would train this person, how would I break down that job, and the kind of cues and supports that I would use to do that. Again, discovery and job development are not isolated. All this stuff's interconnected, and if you're missing, the accomplishments and the skills and the practice in one area, it's going to impact the other area. So this is one of the reasons why we've worked so hard, and VCU, us, and Mark Gold Associates, WISE out in Seattle, a lot of us have really worked hard to professionalize the frontline services. This is what the Association of Community Rehab Educators, or ACRE, is about. This is what APSE is about, is professionalizing this. So we also want to, again, perform skills and task observation in multiple environments. A lot of this is done around the house. You can have families do this work. If dad says, well, Sam mows the lawn with me every Saturday. Well, great. Could you shoot some video of that or some pictures of that for us? Or could we come over Saturday and help you mow the lawn and observe that? You really do want to observe what the person does and the kind of supports that they're given in the process. You might also see places where, wow, with a little bit additional instruction, I could have that person, running the power mower by themselves instead of dad having to be with them all the time. Again, good job coach approaches. So again, I can give you some examples of the kind of activities that we've been doing lately. We worked with a young lady in East Los Angeles who had grown up, with her mom teaching her how to make just the best Mexican food in the world, but she had never baked anything, and cooking's different than baking. And so we said, okay, well, we're going to observe you cooking, we're going to go grocery shopping, we're going to the farmer's market, we're going to put together several dishes, and we'll do that in her kitchen where she's comfortable and where she has the tools that she uses and is familiar with. And then we said, we also like to do something that's related but different. Right? To see how people adapt, to see how people generalize. And so, we said, well, what would you like to bake, but that you've never baked? And she says, oh, a pineapple upside down cake. And so we got the recipe and got the ingredients, and, she had a blast. And we learned that she could measure because she wasn't measuring during her cooking activities, because she just eyeballed it the way most of us cook, right? But baking's a very precise art. And so, we watched that and ended up getting her a couple different jobs, 2 part-time jobs that were created for her. So, again, it could be as simple as something as going into a garage and changing the oil on the car. Again, that could be done at home. That could be done with a staff car. If the person had some sort of transportation or mechanical theme. But we want to, take that information and make sure that it is observable. That is, that that there's an action in there, that we could take a picture of that. We want to document things, and we tend to shoot less video than we shoot still pictures, because we can use the still pictures later in a digital resume for the person. We avoid situations where there isn't action. If you've got somebody who you think has, let's say, an emerging fashion theme, for instance, going window shopping in the mall, that's not really a discovery activity. There's not anything really measurable there, or that I could take a picture of and show it to my grandma and say, Grandma, what's this person doing? There's no action to it. There's nothing to show an employer that would impress that person. So anyway, and through the process, we take notes on what it is that we observed. And it's important to not speculate. It's important not to say, little things like, well, she did this, but she didn't do it very well. No. Just write what you saw. The other piece here, too, is as you're doing activities, if you're doing activities in front of other people, we want to use that systematic instruction. We've had cases where recently we took a person into a soap making company. They make hand soaps, and this wonderful teacher that we work with, just great, but she was just learning this stuff. The young man that we were working with, the employer set up a big block of soap for cutting. Right, and you use this, basically it's a wire, it's like a cheese cutter, and you just slide it down over the soap, and it cuts the soap, and then you come back and you do a couple more cuts, and pretty soon you have 12 bars of soap. The teacher didn't know to get her hands in there and help this person with the cutter, and just let him kind of fumble around in front of the employer. Well, what's the employer seeing? The employer's seeing, well, this kid's incompetent. Well, no. The kid's like every other person who's never cut soap before. I wouldn't know what to do with that or how to do it. I would need some guidance on that. So we would show the person first, and then we might even do, like a hand over hand, and then fade that really quickly, right? Because you fade hand over hand, generally it fades really fast, which is why we use hand over hand, because it's a really easy prompt to get rid of. Much easier to get rid of than a verbal prompt, for instance. So you want to use, your skills through even the activities, because you don't want that person to look incompetent in front of an employer or in front of anybody else, really, right? So just be careful of that when you're doing activities out in public. And again, this idea of speculation, and again, it may be a minor point, but what we're seeking is this clarity of what it was that we witnessed when the person did these particular activities, or when we did a home visit or a neighborhood visit, when we're identifying behavioral cues sometimes, or clues. So here are some that I just pulled out of some discovery staging records, which is where we put the profile information or the discovery information. The house was quite clean in anticipation of our visit. You don't know that. Maybe it's not a wild guess, but it's enough to say the house was quite clean, and then tie that to something later that might make sense, because Jennifer is fastidious, and in observation, she won't leave the house in the morning until she's dusted and vacuumed. Something like that, something very, very observable. You could take a picture of that, and guess what? You've just identified some skills and tasks that the person can do that might be really important for job development down the road. Bob has a collection of country and western CDs, period. Instead of because he identifies with the stories the song tells. You may or may not know that, but is it really important at this point? It probably isn't, right? I have a bunch of CDs too because I like the stories that they tell. Doesn't have very much bearing on my work unless maybe I have an entertainment theme or a music theme. Mom is overprotective. Again, something that we see all the time, or dad is overprotective, or sister is overprotective. Leave that alone. I think that, again, I think if you're seeing clues like that, ask the question, are there safety concerns? Something to that degree. Are you worried about losing SSI? Right? And that's not maybe the first date question. That's a second visit question, right? Dad sat in the kitchen while the rest of us talked. That's all we need to know. He feels intimidated by the team. You don't really know that, so don't put that in. And even if you did, great. Keep it to yourself and work on that. Work to engage Dad if you can. Bob showed off his tool collection because he's proud of his skills. You don't know that. Right? Maybe he just likes to collect tools. Maybe he's, maybe that's the thing. The reason, it's not the end of the world if you include a little speculation, okay? But the problem is that the more you make judgments, the farther you get from where the ball should be, right? The more congested the conversation and the information gets. It gets convoluted. And what starts to happen is you start to talk yourself out of this person going to work. And so that's one of the reasons why I bring this up, is don't put up barriers against who this person is, right? So, discovery activities confirm and investigate skills and tasks. If you've got a hunch, go out and do something. You got somebody with a transportation theme, don't think, oh, well, he keeps telling me he wants to drive, but he can't pass a driver's test. Great. There's hundreds of thousands of jobs that require you to drive that don't require a driver's license. I had a bunch of them when I was a kid. I drove a forklift in a pickle factory. I was, 13 years old, I think. I drove all over every vehicle on the farm. I drove long before I was age to have a driver's license. So we have to rethink. I always keep in mind that Wilbur and Orville Wright did not have pilot's licenses. So, again, the activities should really be driven by what's the person want to do. Figure it out. We meet a lot of people who say, I want to drive. Well, I don't know whether that's something that person's going to do for a living, but if I'm struggling for ideas with that person, I'm taking it, and we're going to the go-kart track for a couple hours or something. We're going to go play a round of golf, and he can drive the cart. That's mostly what I would do anyway, because I don't play golf. But again, a lot of this stuff can be done around the home or in the community. You got somebody with an emerging agriculture theme, right? I didn't say a gardening theme because gardening's part of agriculture, right? So gardening's too restrictive. Agriculture is huge. Hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people work in agriculture, right? Only this many people do gardening. We'll get there, but you're going to miss something along the way. If somebody grows up working with their mom in the rose garden, well, that's great, but there's a big world out there. Maybe this is going to be the greatest wheat farmer ever, or maybe they're going to work at a flour mill or whatever. You're counting yourself out by over-focusing, right? So, again, be broad in your vocational themes. And again, we have lots written on vocational themes. You can go to our website and look at that stuff. So an activity, again, is active. The person must be engaged, right? And you should be able to take a picture. And again, you want to use those pictures later, maybe selectively in a portfolio. For work trials, I like to use nonprofits instead of for-profits, unless I've got a for-profit that I think, well, this might turn into a job, or this is a place that maybe I'm never coming back here. But I think we also need to be careful about nonprofits. Every community on earth has a group of folks with intellectual disabilities working in the food bank, working in the Humane Society, and of course it's non-paid and it's long-term. I try to stay out of those places. We've learned what we're going to learn in those places, I think, for the most part. The community is a really rich environment. There's so much going on there, even in the smallest of communities, that we tend to underutilize our community. So again, try an activity, or two in unfamiliar locations, or performing, unfamiliar or unrelated kinds of tasks. So we also use informational interviews with a very old strategy, but again, we've nuanced it for discovery and for customized employment. We use them in job development. I'm not really going to talk about that today and how we use that, but we do go in saying we're doing job development right now. We're not hiding from that. In discovery, we're setting up informational interviews as a way of engaging employers, but we're asking for advice. Right? So it's that idea of asking for advice versus asking for a job. People love to give you advice. So we set it up that we ask very specifically for seat time. We want to sit down. Okay, here's the deal. I'm working with, here's the script. I'm working with a young man who's interested in aviation. I'm a career counselor. I don't know very much about aviation. So we're interviewing a number of people who are successful in aviation, and we'd like to have about 20 minutes of your time where we could come in and get some ideas from you and some advice about how it is that, if you were starting over in aviation, what would you do? What advice would you give to this young person? And, we get about 85% of the calls that we make or however we engage them. Sometimes it's a call, sometimes it's face-to-face, sometimes it's email. We like to have a connection to that person. So, the other night I was in a restaurant that's owned by my friends, Fred and Joan. And, in talking to Fred's the chef, and talking to him about his suppliers, he's a farm-to-table kind of restaurant. He's got 50 local suppliers. So if I'm working with somebody with a culinary or an agricultural theme, I just go to Fred, right? And say, hey, I'm working with this guy, and the guy's really interested in meat, or, dead animals, or however you want to say it, into butchering. Who's your meat guy? Who's the guy who's making your cold cuts? Who you got? Well, he's got 10 different people, right? And then there's the seafood guy. And, all I have to do is ask Fred for a favor. Can you introduce me? Can you give me a name? And I'll just say, hey, Fred suggested I talk to you, right? Some warming up of that call. Look in your checkbook, see where you're spending money. Go to your organization's accounts receivable and see who you're buying and selling to, right? You buy a lot of stuff in the community. Are you leveraging that? And again, at this point, we're not looking for jobs. I want some seat time. I want to sit down with you. And if we have time after we're done talking, could we get a tour maybe? But a tour, I don't really care about the tour in the beginning. What I care about is sitting across the table from somebody who's never sat across the table with somebody who maybe has autism and has a seizure disorder and is wearing a helmet, right? In 5 or 10 minutes, we can start to humanize that. But if we're walking around a factory or a shop, we're not having face-to-face conversation. This person's busy, talking to his team and signing papers that have to be signed and showing us the equipment and stuff. I want quiet. I want a place for a conversation, right? And again, it's more in depth than that. But I've found that if I ask for 20 minutes, that seems to be the sweet spot. It's not too little, and it's not so much that I'm going to take up their whole day. People love to talk about what they do. I don't think we've ever done an informational interview in less than an hour, right? So again, part of this process is determining the vocational themes and the evidence for those themes. And again, then we have, when job, depending on what state you're in and how you prefer to do it, a lot of times we say discovery is done when you have evidence for 3 overarching vocational themes. That is, you've done activities. These indeed are themes. There are some skills and tasks that the person knows how to do, that you are also saying, I know how to teach this person more of these kinds of things, or they'll learn more of these if I can get them into this particular work site. After that, in career development, what we do is a list of 20. That's a list of 20 companies or places to work accessible to the person for each of the vocational themes. So 60 of those. Now that blows people's heads off, right? When I say 60 potential businesses. Out west in Montana, we have a thing called the Google. And I used Google the other day to do a list of 20 for somebody, well, a list of 60 actually, for somebody whose profile was basically done. We had evidence of their 3 vocational themes. They're in a moderately sized company or town of about 25,000 people, and it took me about an hour working 1,000 miles away to do their draft lists of 20. Right? So it's not difficult. Plus you already know people and you're going out during discovery doing this, so you should already have some ideas. That list will change. That list will change as you do it and as you add to it through the discovery process. What do I want to know? The bottom line is what I need to know about people is when and where is this person in flow? When and where is this person doing what they like to do? Right? That's an important thing. And of course, all of us have multiple places of those. Even if we haven't ever worked, we have things that we like to do, right? And so part of our job is figuring that out. When and where are the support needs the highest, right? Think about in your own life, when are you melting down? And we need to know that because we need to figure out the supports, or we need to figure out how do we avoid these situations and these environments. And then again, the people who know this person best, because I can learn from them, obviously including that person. Again, we want the most engaging interests and tasks that we can kind of find. A lot of times what we'll find is there will be a dominant theme and then a couple other sort of residual themes. That's okay. I want 3 because it shows that I've done my work. It shows that I've done my due diligence. Also, people are not one-dimensional. I don't care who they are. It's very rare that we can't find some evidence of some emerging theme. It's not maybe fully blown with somebody who hasn't ever worked before, but it's in there, But a lot of times we'll have somebody where, well, computers are the main theme, and then we have this other thing, he likes to draw on his computer and sketch. Well, okay, so maybe there's an emerging art theme. Let's go with that. Let's investigate that. We have to be careful because, sometimes people want to turn, again, these mild interests or environmental factors into vocational themes. Like, he feeds his dog, he's really into animals. Well, that's great. I'm into animals too, but I don't really have an animal theme. I don't want to work with animals. I like our dogs and our cats and our horses and all that stuff. That's great, but that's not who I am. I'm not going to work with animals probably. I could, right? Because I know a lot, I have skills and tasks. So if I was struggling with myself on a 3rd theme, I would put that in there just to move the ball forward, right? Because I could work if I needed to in that area and it would be okay with me. Again, how do we teach new skills to this person? Because they're going to need to learn new skills. And a lot of times that's just, the foundation of supported employment, learning things where you're going to learn, where you're going to use them. In other words, at work, right? Picking up those skills, making sure that negotiation is not about just this static job where nothing new comes to them. We want to engineer from day one the idea that this person is going to advance in their career, that they're going to get out of the salary cap that all grocery baggers, let's say, work under, that no matter how good a grocery bagger you are, you're never going to make more than $10 an hour or whatever. You're never going to get promoted. We need to work around that through a negotiated process. So, again, just to get at vocational themes are sort of, again, a broad category, not a job description. We don't want you thinking in job descriptions. It's too limiting. We don't want you asking that question, where should this person work? Or, oh, that'd be a great job for them. We want you to go out and investigate like the sum total of all these things, all the activities, the preferred tasks, the interests, the work culture and conditions of employment, the skills, the personal attributes of this person, put that all into a mix under these vocational themes that hold hundreds of thousands of job descriptions, and you'll get something better. Again, themes are not job descriptions. They are, like I said, these categories that hold lots and lots of stuff. And I like to combine themes when I can. So if someone like Melanie here, who is obviously an artist, if she also has, let's say, a transportation theme, put those together. Where do people work in my community who have an art theme and a transportation theme? Well, they might work at the Railroad Museum, right? If you've ever thought about that, do you have one of those? They work at a hot rod shop. They work at a paint shop. They work at a tattoo shop, maybe specializing in, in automotive tattoos. I don't know. I look around town. I use my connections to try to find, where are those folks working? And I try to find the smallest and the most obscure businesses I can. Why? Because I'm going to learn something from them, right? And, it's going to expand my brain a little bit to think differently. I'm going to learn about new technology that's used there. And I'm going to go where no other job developer has ever been, right? Some of the common vocational themes: animals, art, transportation, children, education, history. You can go down the list here. Advocacy is a really big one because advocacy holds all kinds of different pieces, right? Advocacy could be everything from case management to law enforcement to working for the transportation department in your state or your county because they have a safety program. All kinds of different sorts of things that people do inside of that one category. Using that broad theme helps us to sort of think outside the box. The other thing that we do is, again, this idea of supply chain mining. And I'm not going to go through this whole thing because you can get it in the handouts. But basically, here we just started with a couple simple themes: transportation and entertainment. That led us to, interviewing somebody at a small Napa auto parts store that, wow, it's got a machine shop in the back. It's got a paint room in the back where they mix paints for all the auto body shops in town. There's a guy back there, making air conditioner hoses. There's all kinds of stuff behind the counter. And then there's the radio station, and that led us to a voice coach, and that led us to a recording studio, and that led us somewhere else. Again, you follow this supply chain, right? And it starts to expand all your opportunities. You find all of these businesses out there. And again, you can go to our website and find this stuff too. What I would say is to avoid retail job development. And that retail job development is two things. One is going to retail stores all the time. There's a lot to learn in retail. Unfortunately, a lot of people never get to learn that stuff because they spend their job either putting things in bags or opening boxes. And so retail doesn't have much of a path anymore. Now, I have lots of exceptions to that, but I try not to go to the box stores. I tell anybody in our projects, stay out of those places. The other piece is that the other side of retail job development, which is you're going in and you're asking, are you hiring? And you're only seeing what any other customer would see. So why do we go to retail so much? Because they can't throw you out, right? And all you have to do is go in, ask for an application, ask if you're hiring, and you do that 5 or 6 times a day, and you go back to the office and you say, man, I'm working hard today. That's job finding. That's not job development, right? Where we go is we seek out artisanal and small businesses. That is businesses of fewer than 20 people for a number of reasons. There's like, there's 38,000 businesses in the United States with more than 500 employees. 38,000. That's where all the job developers go. That's your McDonald's and Burger King and Home Depot and Walmart and Lowe's and all that. And those are perfectly good businesses. Don't hear me say those aren't good businesses. But they've got a process, and that process tends to screen out people with disabilities. And it's hard to make a personal connection through their HR process. So I seek out those single owner operated businesses, or those businesses of fewer than 20 people, because there's about 38 million of those. There's a lot more. It's a numbers game. And I learn something new every time I go there, and it's natural mentoring. If I walk in with somebody with a music theme into a luthier who's making guitars, you know what? They instantly, usually, they have a connection. Now, it may not lead to a job, but it's going to lead to information that I can use in later job development. And this is a relationship. You do not propose marriage on the first date. You are getting information. It's too early to pop the question, right? You haven't done your job yet. So we compile the list of 20 for each theme, right? That's completed. The list of 20 are generally completed during the job development phase, right? And we list those companies that are accessible to a person, where people with similar themes work, where favorable conditions match or can be developed who that person is, and where that person contributes. That there is an economic rationale for why you're there, right? We have a saying that wages are the residue of profit. Right? A job is created through hard work that generates sales for the company, right? And those sales generate a profit, and those profits are turned into salary, right? We don't hire people because we're good people generally, right? We're good people and we hire because that person makes sense to our bottom line. So thanks for sticking with me today. Again, I'll refer you to the Job Developer's Handbook, to Making Self-Employment Work for people with disabilities, to our website, griffinhammis.com, to the ODEP website at Labor, and of course to the VCU website. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.